thanks for listening to the People Not Titles podcast. We are brought to you by our great sponsors, Land Trust Title Services, your partners for results. Well, hello, this is Steve Kaempf with the People Not Titles podcast. That's what it's called, right, Matt?
That's what they tell us.
Okay, and we are doing the March edition of Market Trends, March 2025. And Matt, we have a full slate here, and I just want to introduce my cohort and partner, Matt Lombardi.
Thank you.
Matt, I did not see you get an Oscar last night, but I don't know, are these Oscar-worthy performances that we're doing?
I think we need to start a little smaller, but I think at some point we will be Oscar-worthy.
Okay, all right.
Maybe local Emmy.
Local Emmy.
And then move up from there.
Get the golden microphone like Jack Brickhouse got at one point.
We should have a golden microphone.
Okay, we're going to do that. We're going to get one.
So, yeah.
Okay, Matt, let's get into it. The NAR, it's a topic that does not go away, and I think it's top of mind. But I see movement here. I see things happening, and so let's talk about it.
So first and foremost, NAR names a new general counsel. End of last year, Katie Johnson, who was their long-term general counsel, was let go. They have officially replaced her position with a gentleman named, where is he? Jonathan Waclowski, who is...
Irish guy.
He could be Irish. Mm-hmm. His name may say differently. But Jonathan he has been with part of NAR, I believe, since 2017.
Okay.
He was previously vice president in their legal group. He has a long history. He's a political guy, if I'm not mistaken. He was part of... Scott Walker's 2016 presidential campaign. He's part of Republican National Committee, worked at another D.C. law firm. He's based out of D.C. But this is sort of backfilling the general counsel for all the stuff that has transpired and will be coming up still with NAR. So,
you think it's a good move, Matt?
I don't know the gentleman at all, but to have some political background and operatives, and if he's a part of past Republican campaign in the Republican National Committee, it's probably a good thing with this administration.
Okay,
that
good.
He probably has some inroads, and he'll do just fine, I'm sure.
Matt, do you think it's a move they had to make because of what happened last year, like to shift it up, switch it up?
I was surprised that Katie lasted as long as she did.
Okay.
As general counsel, and so no, I'm not surprised by any of this. I'm actually more surprised they didn't make an announcement, and this isn't like an official announcement. Like NAR has not publicized this. I caught this a couple different places, and I forget, one of the resources said they've reached out for NAR for comment, and they've gotten none.
Okay.
But he is officially on their website. He is their general counsel.
It's official. Okay. So
official.
This is a news ahead of the news, actually.
News ahead of the news, but yeah. So
okay.
Keep an eye on it, but he is the new counsel.
Okay, and Matt, the next thing is that NAR makes the initial payment. They settled for $418 million, which had a consortium of smaller brokerages. The bigger brokerages had to negotiate their own settlement. They made their first payment.
First payment was made on February 20th last month.
Okay.
In the amount of $197 million.
You think they just wrote out a check?
That's a good question.
Okay.
Maybe Venmo'd it.
Venmo.
Maybe Zelled it. That's a good question.
That's funny.
But apparently they have 4 years to pay the settlement. So this is the first payment as part of this
sizable chunk.
Sizable chunk. So you realtors out there, that's $197 million of mostly your dues dollars that will not be used for other stuff.
And Matt, to be clear, this is designed to go to the sellers that were part of the lawsuit.
Correct.
And
the
attorneys. Thank you, Matt.
Yes, the attorneys will be doing very nicely from this settlement. But yeah, so this goes into an escrow account. And so for all eligible people who are part of the settlement, they would get an appropriate chunk of it based on how many there are.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we have the NAR. This, Matt, was shocking to me.
Oh, it shouldn't be shocking.
Well,
it should not be
well,
shocking.
Actually, the numbers were shocking. Why don't you deliver the news?
So this is a great headline and great information for anybody involved in the real estate industry, but especially for realtors out there. And this is for all realtors across the country. NAR spent more on lobbying in 2024 than any other company or organization. They were number one.
Wow. So do you think they have the big foam number one fingers?
If they do, it may not be publicized. They may have one in a back office somewhere. But they spent just over $86 million for lobbying last year, which I agree, Steve. NAR is historically number one or number two in terms of lobbying expenditures. I was kind of shocked at the amount of $86 million last year. Now, the caveat to that, it was an election year, election cycle. So across all industries, companies, membership groups who lobby, the amounts were up, but just amazing. And so taking all things into account, over $4.4 billion, that's with a B, was spent on lobbying efforts last year. Now, I'm not going to get into, is that appropriate? Is that not appropriate? All I'm saying is there's a lot of money in politics, and it may or may not be a good thing.
Wow. And Matt, so if I'm a realtor sitting there and I'm a person who's paid my dues and paid my fees, do I feel good about this?
Well, you need to look at, and that's where you would need to look at NAR's legislative victories, which I'm sure they have a nice presentation or will have a nice presentation of their legislative victories from 2024. Now, a lot of this money goes to political candidates from last election cycle. So this includes senators, congresspeople, et cetera, et cetera. So they're supporting certain candidates for office based on how they are pro or not pro realtor.
So Matt, what this says to me is, for good or for bad, if it is a pay-to-play, quid pro quo, whatever it is, or not, it says to me at the very least that there is actions and activities going on behind the scenes that the NAR is involved in, because it's not just doling out money, it is activities that are occurring to influence the decision makers and lawmakers on how to make real estate and being a realtor a priority here. Correct. And I don't want no judgment on that. Yeah, you have the top 10 industries.
This is just for context
for
everybody watching. So the top 10 segments or industries that had the highest spend for 2024. Number 1, pharmaceuticals, health. Number 2, electronics. 3, insurance. 4, securities, investments. 5, oil and gas. Number 6 was real estate. 7, air transport. 8, hospitals, nursing homes. 9, civil servants, public officials, and 10, electric utilities. Probably more information, but that gives you context of who the huge lobbying groups were.
So out of the 86 million, real estate as a total was 151 million, to give you context.
Correct.
And pharmaceuticals was 384 million. So that's a big, that's doing half of what pharmaceuticals, they have big lobbying. And all that. So it is a powerful group, and if you remove the NAR from the equation here, things could dramatically change for realtors.
Right, and I think the real estate industries, all the organizations, it's like NAR, you're the lobbying group on behalf of us, and we'll get to a little bit of that of who that is.
Okay, so let's talk about the 10 top groups in the real estate lobbying category, and what surprised me is that the NAR is 10 times more than any other group on the list.
So the top 10 groups for real estate lobbying efforts in 2024, obviously number 1 is National Association of Realtors. Number 2, National Multifamily Housing Council, and they were just under 9 million. So almost a 10x for NAR versus everybody else. Number 3, a group called the Real Estate Roundtable. That's an invitation-only group. Number 4, National Association of REITs, Real Estate Investment Trusts. 5 was the Mortgage Bankers Association.
And that struck me, Matt. You have the MBA, which you think they're big lobbying, big banks, all this. In context, Realtors, 86 million, MBA, 3 million.
Correct.
Wow.
Correct. Number 6, Council of Federal Home Loan Banks. 7, National Apartment Association. 8, American Land Title Association. So that was just 1.6 million.
Yep.
And then 9, Commercial Real Estate Finance Council. and then 10 NAIOP, which is Commercial Real Estate Development Association. So those are the top 10. If you look, opensecrets.org, I believe, is the website. You can go in and look at all the spending and who's doing what. But these are the big players.
So Matt, I think we'll just go with it. That I don't know how the money is spent, but I believe it's a good news story for the NAR.
Yeah. So in terms of how the money is spent, the majority of it is contributions to specific candidates across the country in the last election cycle.
And so it may be interesting, and we won't do this because we don't want to get too far into the weeds, but it may be interesting to see, are these contributions actually impacting realtors? Are they moving forward some other political agenda?
Correct.
And in that case, we'd have more questions.
So what I would say is they supported specific candidates last year in that election cycle. I'm sure that most of the candidates they supported won, because typically that's the case. And so now it's, will those candidates support realtor and real estate industry focused initiatives now over the next 2-year cycle?
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
So Matt, we have more news on the NAR and the Phoenix Realtors.
Yeah.
So take us back to where we were and now what the new situation is there, because this is important, not just because we don't live in Phoenix, we're not operating in Phoenix, but this was a microcosm of what could propagate across the whole nation.
Right. So just going back in time a little bit, Phoenix Realtors and the MLS were created. They had launched and started promoting a new membership category called MLS Choice. MLS Choice was going to allow non-realtors to have a membership into the local Phoenix area MLS system. We've talked about this, but I'll mention it again. Typically, MLSs, which are owned by realtor organizations, they have to abide by the NAR rule that says in order to access MLS, you have to be a realtor. And so if you're not a realtor, you cannot join the MLS.
Which that, in and of itself, how it sounds to me, is that's a protection for realtors, so that everyone just doesn't have access to the MLS, access to all the information, and start operating separate from a professional real estate person.
Correct. So we thought this was big news a couple months ago when we started talking about it. We didn't know where it was going to go. Well, now we know where it went. NAR threatened or may have filed a lawsuit against them. In some, Phoenix Realtors as well as NAR have settled their disagreement, and now Phoenix will not have a membership category for their MLS, and you still have to be a realtor.
So Matt, did Phoenix, was it Phoenix that also wanted to have access to the MLS separate from the NAR?
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe so.
Phoenix is going rogue, it sounds like to me.
Right.
Or they're trying to.
They were trying to. So non-realtor licensees can still purchase certain products and service from Phoenix Realtors, but they do not gain membership status, can't use the realtor marks, etc.
Okay.
So this has been settled for now, but there may be more coming on down, once again, with the MLSs and realtor membership. So this was just an update on some past news that we talked about.
Okay, great. Now we have Leaky. Is that
Leaky.
Leaky,
which is a Memphis-based brokerage, but they're in multi-states in the southeast.
Okay, they allege coverage under the NAR deal, despite so they're trying to piggyback onto the NAR settlement, but they are outside of the bucket that were supposed to be included in the settlement.
Correct. So the settlement, which took place last year, those larger brokerages under, I forget the $1 billion threshold, they were left out of the NAR settlement.
Okay.
According to the rules, Leaky was exempt from being part of the settlement, so they had to settle on their own. They have recently come back and said, yes, we're one of the largest brokerages in the U.S., but we should be included under NAR settlement, and they're seeking a delay in any proceedings against them until the NAR settlement is ultimately finalized.
So Matt, I'm smelling implications for everyone that was outside the bucket if something like this happens, where they get grandfathered in, so to speak.
Correct. So it could be an interesting play. It could be a smart play, especially with the new administration and what may or may not happen. If, maybe they'll go back and say, no, you guys don't have to pay this. Who knows what will happen? But I think it's an interesting take on a larger brokerage saying, we're not going to settle. We're not going off on our own. We say we're part of this. It's now in your court.
Wow. So
interesting.
more legal fees, more
Yep.
haranguing.
Yep.
Okay, Matt. Now let's get into, the NAR has taken some shots. And so now we have the 4 ways that NAR membership powers realtor success. Tell us about that.
So this is, and I've always wondered, like, okay, NAR is this huge organization doing 100 different things for different segments of the realtor membership. If you were to distill down the top 4 to 5 things that are important to all realtors, what would they be? And luckily, NAR did this earlier in February, and this was part of an email to realtors that it was explaining the 4 ways NAR membership powers realtors. So number 1, advocacy. And we don't need to talk about it, but number 1 thing that they're doing for you as realtors is advocacy. And that's national, state, local levels. Number 2.
And they're putting their money where their mouth is on that one.
Totally.
Okay?
Totally. Number 2, research, which I think I've said this before. If you were to rank some of the highest level things that they do for the realtor in the real estate industry, their research, NAR's research is the best.
They have a lot of data that helps realtors position themselves properly.
Exactly. Number 3, education. So your realtor organization is positioning themselves as a leader in education. So NAR does have a lot of designations, certifications that they offer you. So that's something. And I think education may be a key driver of additional revenues for NAR that they are going to need to offset their settlement payments.
Okay, Matt, so in your experience, are these designations important to the buyers and sellers to look at it and say, oh, this? Or is it more the knowledge that the realtors gain from these designations helps them leverage their expertise better in the market?
What I'll say is a little from column A and a little from column B.
Okay.
So I'm going to address the home buyers and sellers. Home buyers and sellers, I think it's not a bad thing to position yourself as an expert as a buyer's representative or a residential specialist or I'm a commercial specialist. Those are all good things to have if you're focused on those things. Do consumers necessarily know about all these different designation certifications? Probably not. But from a realtor perspective, as you just said, I think having the knowledge background, especially if you're addressing these subcategories of real estate, is a great thing. And then to position yourself and leverage it when you're showcasing yourself on a listing presentation or meeting buyers, saying, here are my credentials. Not only do I have my real estate license, and I am a member of the National Association of Realtors, I've gone above and beyond and got these extra credentials to help me more knowledgeable and to help me work better with you in this transaction.
So, Matt, I'd like to see if any of these folks with these special designations do better.
They do.
They do. Okay,
They do.
so you're way ahead of it.
Yeah, and in fact, part of NAR's roll-up of when they showcase members, like years of experience, how much their income is versus new realtors. Obviously, the experienced realtors are more. And there is a category, which I don't have here, those with certifications and designations versus those without. It is a higher level.
I love it.
So,
good.
Because most of those realtors that have gone above and beyond to get those designations and certifications are serious about their profession.
They're investing in themselves.
They're investing in themselves. They're typically more experienced. So that is also what translates into the higher income levels.
Okay.
And then the last thing that NAR is positioning itself for you realtor members is community. NAR fosters a supportive community where you can network, collaborate, and grow professionally. And they showcase, Good Neighbor Awards, which is a great annual program that they recognize the volunteer activities of realtors as well as their YPN, Young Professionals Network.
So they have YPN. Is that their proprietary network?
It's not, I don't know if it's a proprietary network. It's essentially a subgroup of the membership where younger realtors can mix mingle.
Okay, and there's a lot of people in the YPN. And do they have local, or do they leave the local communities to the local real estate boards?
Correct.
Oh, they do.
So
Okay,
there's
great.
a YPN
Yeah.
community at the national level. They used to have a dedicated newsletter and a staff person. They may or may not still have that. But most definitely, I know here in the local Chicago marketplace that all the local boards and associations of realtors definitely have a YPN group associated with them.
Great.
Yep.
And so then you have here, Matt, they're going to make a play to get some revenue.
Well, that's what I was saying with the education component.
Yeah, okay.
You know, when you look at where non-dues revenue comes for the realtor organization, you know, meetings and events is one of them, their conventions, but the other component would be education. So I think that's something that NAR is going to be looking at, is how do we monetize this more and get a bigger play for people to get more education, while NAR is going to make some more revenue off of that.
So Matt, what I would say is I think we've covered in the last 3 or 4 episodes how important we thought the NAR, it would be for the NAR to articulate their value proposition, make it clear, get it out there.
Yeah.
And I would say job well done here
Yeah.
in showing the value. Now, every realtor has to step back and go, are these things a reality for me? And if they're not, is it my fault or is it their fault?
Yep.
And if it's my fault, I can engage more. If it's their fault, where a person is saying, I have been engaging, I have this, I didn't get the advocacy, research doesn't help me much, education, meh, and community, well, you know, if those things don't resonate, I think you're going to see a backlash. And if they do resonate, I think you're going to see people calm down and say, okay, I got it. You're investing into our efforts, and you are also creating these buckets where I can benefit.
Yeah, and I found this interesting just because NAR has so much stuff under their umbrella. Like, what would be those top things? So this is what they have identified as their 4 top things for now. So
great.
I think it's good, but yeah, it's all the independent, you know, you realtors out there, what you get the benefit from and how this impacts you. Maybe something completely different than we just talked about.
Matt, do you see anything else that you would add to the list, knowing the inner workings?
Those are the big 4.
Okay.
Those are the big 4.
Okay.
So I agree with these.
Super.
Yep.
And it does say something to me that if you invest in the education, or you're the type of person that does, you're going to get a return on that investment. So that looks like a good news story for the NAR.
You know, and that, you know, there's 1.5 million realtors out there. When you get a designation certification, you're part of that group. You know, there's you're part of a sub-network of realtors where you could do business with other ABRs, you know, buyer representatives for referrals or resources that way. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Moving to Michigan, Matt, what's going on there?
So I think we talked about this before, but if not, there's a couple Michigan brokers who want to split MLS access from realtor membership. And so this is just part of the ongoing stuff that's happening in the industry. We've talked about this in previous episodes, but 2 Michigan brokers are, how it's written here, clap back at NAR in their attempt to have their antitrust suit tossed. In essence, the plaintiffs said the motion to dismiss filed by NAR and other defendants of the case it's wrong. You shouldn't do this. So NAR is saying this is an antitrust case, you need to keep it. And what these guys in Michigan are saying is, hey, there's other states doing this. Alabama, for example, California. So there's states and Georgia that have separate realtor membership, separate MLS membership, and they're saying, we want that for the state of Michigan. NAR is filing a counter argument saying no. So just an update. We'll see what happens.
Okay. More to come on that, but
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a trend, Matt.
Yep.
Okay, let's talk about fewer agents are switching brokerages. That was interesting, Matt.
Yeah, so this is something typically end of the year, beginning of the year, there's a lot of realtors that say, I'm going to move from one franchise to the other, one local.
Recruiting season.
There's always recruiting going on, as you know, amongst brokerages, but typically year-end, beginning of the year is when everybody moves. Well, apparently this year, not much movement, according to this Realtix survey, where they're saying it's unusually subdued this year in terms of agents going from company to company. And the reasoning behind that is market uncertainty, fewer new agents, and a lack of disruptive business models contributed to the slowdown.
The People Not Titles podcast is brought to you by Land Trust Title Services. your partners for results.
Slow down.
So what that means is if we have these disruptive business models, whether it be the kind of recruiting model, the high commission model, those have all been introduced.
Correct.
The people who are going to go left.
Right.
And now you have, it's a little bit more traditional where it's a bigger decision to move. It's costly, right? New signs, new this, new that, lots of new efforts. And so people are holding pat, waiting for the market to kick back up or whatever.
Yeah. So there is still movement amongst people from company to company,
Sure.
but I see it as well. It's lower.
So you don't have people leaving in mass to one thing or another, the new shiny toy.
Right. Right. And I don't see, like here in the Chicago marketplace, it's not like there's a new company trying to establish a footprint here. Mm-hmm. There's nobody from the outside coming in. It's established players, the acquisition between
Yes.
and, Compass.
You have some of those pockets.
Some of those things, which translates into those and/or Compass agents saying, I want to go somewhere else.
So if you are a broker or a brokerage that has lost an inordinate amount of agents, it's not generally happening. So that's somewhere to look at your process or your value proposition to your agents or whatever is being offered in your market. But I did think it was also interesting, Matt, that the number of realtors declined.
Yes. Not as much as I think we all anticipated, but there is a decline. And this year, I think there'll be a further decline.
And it says here that those with at least one transaction annually, those closing continue to decline with fewer agents switching brokerages. So there's still decline, people falling off, people quitting, maybe not renewing their license. But anyway.
Right. And I think companies are looking more closely at their bottom line and looking at agents who don't do a transaction or did one transaction last year. Is it worth that brokerage to keep that agent on their books? Maybe, maybe not. That's up to each brokerage to decide. But I think brokerages are going to be looking more at the bottom line and profitability of their agents who are doing business.
Yes.
And to me, it makes sense from a business perspective. If you're doing 0 deals and I'm doing 20, who are you going to keep?
Absolutely.
So
Okay.
brokerages will be looking at it, but more to come this year to see if there is any more movement amongst the agent
ranks.
population.
Great. Okay, we have Compass. You said, maybe it was 2 episodes ago, Matt, that Compass, maybe it was last episode, that they were bringing out this new kind of pre-marketing website.
Yeah.
And tell us how's that going?
Well, according to Compass, their pre-marketing listings through private exclusives and coming soon channels have led to higher sales prices and faster offers. According to them, data shows that homes pre-marketed before the listing on the MLS sold for an average of almost 3% more, received offers 8% sooner, and were 30% less likely to have price reductions. So Compass puts it in their little system before it goes on the MLS to give it their exposure. According to their data, it's a good thing.
And they list it at top dollar, and it goes sooner, and all these. But, Matt, I am reminded that Compass made a big pitch, writing out big checks, kind of touting themselves as the technology gurus. And that, just according to my anecdotal market feedback, wasn't exactly, it was a great story, but wasn't necessarily a reality. So they did say that these are data and numbers that they only have internally.
Right.
They're going to make these public.
Right. And so,
but Zillow had a different experience.
So contrasting that with what Zillow says, Zillow states that found that homes not listed in the MLS cost sellers nearly $5,000 each on average. So it's a debate about what we talked about a little bit last year, clear cooperation policy, which is an MLS NAR policy that says once you get a listing, you have 1 day to put it in the MLS.
Right. And to me, now Zillow, do they have a horse in the race to say they want you on the MLS?
Well, they want it on the MLS because they're an aggregator of MLS data to show on Zillow.
So they're arguing for the MLS. Compass
Correct.
is arguing for their system.
And what I'll say, and you know this very well, and many of you probably know this as well, Compass has not had profitability. I think they've been operating at a loss
for a long time.
Yep. Zillow, same thing.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at their P&L and bottom line, I think they were in the red all of last year, as was Compass.
So they're hoping, they're operating at a loss and hoping to make up for it with volume.
Correct. And what Compass and Zillow do great, and you said this, they're in the news all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They're making news all the time. Robert Refkin, the Compass CEO,
He's on the
out there
cover. Yeah,
everywhere.
he's always talking.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's great. So I give them credit for that. Maybe the consumers say, yes, I want to work with Compass.
Yeah, there's name brand awareness just
Correct.
from all the noise.
Correct. But it's up to you, home buyer, seller, who you want to work with.
Matt, and it makes me think that that in different markets you get different results with this strategy. I think in a market where in some markets you may want, I think it would make sense for more people to have access to the home for sale. On the other hand, exclusive, get it first, ordered here. You're clicking around, you're trying to get a hotel. It says, 6 people are looking at this right now. Oh, I better go, oh my gosh.
Exactly.
So they're trying to get that piece of it going.
So it's funny, there's around the corner from my home, there is a Compass listing. Last weekend on a Sunday, I was driving by and I saw a Compass open house sign there. And I said, oh, I didn't know there was a listing here. I actually looked it up. It was not on the MLS. It was not posted yet.
Creates
So
curiosity, right?
An example of a Compass listing where it is now on the MLS.
Okay.
But a week and a half ago, it was not. So just
And so, Matt, this private listing network does give a person an opportunity to try selling at a higher price, right? And then coming into the market at a different price so you don't see these dramatic price reductions.
correct. I mean,
Okay.
it's up to you. But yes, usually people want the highest exposure when they're selling their property. If you're going through an exclusive proprietary model like this, you're not going to get that exposure. You will be limited to those agents within that company.
Yeah, and it does seem attractive to me, though, if I'm a buyer, for this impression that they have access to the secret listings that are out there as opposed to the public ones. So hey, and whatever floats their boat. Okay, Matt. Great news here about title companies. Let's talk about how what their benefit is to the consumer.
Oh my God, the benefit of title companies?
Never ends. Never ends.
Well, the biggest benefit that a title company provides is security. And in this day and age of real estate fraud, cyber fraud, all that, title company is the one that's going to be your best resource for hitting that before it hits you as a realtor or your buyers and sellers. So this little report that you provided, Steve, comes from Alta, which is the Title Trade Association, where last year over 40% of title companies received fraudulent wire requests. So that's a lot. And of those, only 7% were mistakenly sent funds to fraudulent accounts, which sounds like, actually,
it sounds
more than I thought.
right.
But title companies combat wire fraud, and through multiple things. Most companies spend between $1,000 to $25,000 annually on fraud protection.
I think we're spending more, Matt.
I'm sure we are. And 80% train employees at least yearly.
Wow, we're ongoing.
Ongoing.
And Matt, it leads me to that if you're a real estate professional, leaving title to chance, or if you're, whether you're an attorney or an agent, partnering with your title company that has security protocols in place, like Land Trust does, is vital, because you could have the greatest experience in the world, and if the money goes somewhere where it's not supposed to go, I don't care if I found my dream home, I can't buy it.
We're going to talk about at the end about our next Realtor Zoom next week, which is on real estate fraud and security measures. But Steve is absolutely right. Your title company, and especially us here at Land Trust, we have made literally our first priority the security of the transaction. Because there's so much stuff happening in the industry, the horror stories that we won't go into, but people wiring money to fraudulent bank accounts overseas and they have no idea about it until after the fact.
Seller fraud, selling properties that aren't theirs.
Correct. Title pirates who take over someone's vacant land and make it seem like they're the owner of the land, and then hooking up with a realtor. and that realtor selling it, and then the actual landowners after the fact, like, what happened to my land?
Right.
It's gone. You know, or even attorney communications being intercepted via email, where hackers are monitoring your conversations between the attorney and your clients, and then in the fifth email communication, the hacker comes in and says, "Oh, by the way, here's your wiring instructions."
So it looks seamless, but
so
it isn't.
It looks legit, and it's not. So anyway, we'll talk about that later, but we do have a Zoom session.
Yep, if
where
you're
we're gonna
interested,
talk
you
about
can.
that.
So Matt, we have your title companies forge ahead with opportunities despite market uncertainty. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, last year was a challenging year for real estate as well as title companies. This year is looking a little better. There's nowhere to go but up. And so the title industry is facing challenges, but we're looking at growth opportunities and have long-term value. So this is something that you had provided.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to add more
Yeah, you know,
context
I
in
would
here.
just say that what title companies are pushing to do is continue deepening their partnerships with their great clients, leveraging AI, providing security benefits, and, you know, helping just to make the home buying and home selling experience one where people go. It's getting easier and easier as opposed to harder and harder. And I think we're seeing that across the board.
Very good.
Northwest Side Housing Preservation Ordinance, Matt. This is something new. When you read the rules, it's hard to believe someone pulled this off to actually get it and saw it as a value and a benefit to anybody. But that's just my opinion. But tell us what that's about.
So, of course, it's a Chicago-based ordinance because Chicago can be confusing and create convoluted things. But the Northwest Side Housing Preservation Ordinance went into effect on the 1st of March. So today is the 3rd. So 2 days ago, the City Council approved this. And in essence, what it is, it's a pilot program to address and help those renters in a certain area of the near northwest side of the city. So from like the 606 Trail, so Logan Square, Avondale, Humboldt Park, Hermosa neighborhoods. So from, I think it's like Costner to the west, to the Chicago River on the right, and I forget how far north and south, but the near northwest side of the city. And what it is, and all good things, you know, it's a good intent. That
Yeah, if you hear it at first blush, you go, this is amazing.
So this area is a huge area of investment, gentrification. If you go down Milwaukee Avenue, if you haven't been down Milwaukee Avenue on the near northwest side, tons of stuff, apartments, beautiful condos. And it used to be, and still is to some effect, a working class neighborhood. But so many people who have lived there have been priced out because developers come in, buy, and then build. And so what this ordinance, in essence, the intent is to do, is to limit the overwhelming people coming in and buying things and redeveloping it. And
Pricing the regulars out of the market.
Pushing out long-term residents and especially renters. But yes, this ordinance is crazy. So in essence, the program allows, before someone could list a multi-unit property, they have to announce it 60 to 90 days before they let it know. They have to let the current renters of their properties know that, oh, by the way, we're going to list this. And they have to allow those renters the opportunity to potentially buy it, or I believe
assign the rights
for them for someone else to buy it. Confusing, makes no sense, but it is now on the books as of 2 days ago.
Yeah, and if you're an owner of one of these properties, you have just become more constrained in your ability to sell your property. It takes you longer, there's more effort, and all that. We'll see if any of these renters decide to exercise their rights, and wouldn't it be great if a tenant could just say, oh, I'm living here and paying rent, but I think I'll just buy this whole building and have everyone pay me rent now. It could happen. We'll see.
What my biggest question to our team here is, who's going to administer this? Like, who's going to hold everybody accountable to do this? Because there's so many steps and potentially so many people in the process. My take is this is dead on arrival. It's nice on a piece of paper, and it sounds good for people living in this area who may be affected to it. I just don't see anything happening with this.
Yeah, and we'll see. Matt, more to come. Someone wanted a feather in their hat to say they're championing housing, and I don't think that this hits the mark there, but we will see.
I think it's a big waste of time, but that's it.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay, Matt, inflation and mortgage news.
So we'll try and go through this quickly. The consumer price index increased in January from December by 4.4%. Annually, the consumer price index rose by 3%, which means we still got a little inflation in what we're paying for.
But it has cooled down.
It's cooled down. So there's the PCI, which is the Personal Consumption Expenditures Index, which is the Fed's preferred inflation gauge, and that rose by 0.3% in January, slightly below what they expected. Year over year, that index increased by 2.5%. In the core personal consumption expenditures, excludes food and energy, also saw a 2.6 annual rise, smallest since June. So you got two conflicting things. One saying the prices are up a little high, a little lower on one end, a little higher on the other end. Bottom line is, I think it's still up across the board.
Yeah, but I think the big story is, regardless of who's going to get the credit for it, it seems to me like inflation has gotten off of, Ukraine is now all about the news, but inflation has come off the news. I know people talk about eggs in general and eggs, but overall, it seems like inflation is less of a topic in the zeitgeist, so to speak, and so maybe it'll be less of a hindrance or an obstacle for people to justify getting off the schneid to buy homes.
Well, good question.
Okay, so consumer spending and economic outlook, Matt. What is that?
So this is a little data point. January saw the first decline in U.S. consumer spending in almost 2 years, coinciding with record high goods trade deficit as business accelerated imports ahead of potential tariffs. This trend suggests potential economic slowing in the first quarter. So that is the spending. Our economy is based on we need to spend.
Yes.
January is the first month in about 2 years where spending has cooled off. If this continues month over month for the economy, that's not a good thing.
Right.
Once again, we'll wait and see and come back to it.
Yeah, and my feeling was, Matt, over and above interest rates and inflation, consumer confidence, which is, I have a great opportunity, I'm going to be paid more, I want to invest in businesses and all that. I think when people take that mindset, they will start buying homes that maybe they wouldn't think about buying. They'll make renovations, upgrades, make investments, and all that kind of thing. This tells me that is that temperature of that is not rising yet, or not rising at all. So,
right.
Mortgage rates.
Hold on.
Oops.
See, I wrote something in here.
Sorry, here we go.
Little side notes that you don't even know about.
Yeah.
So there's a little data point that I saw this morning. The Chicago metro area has seen a 4.3% increase in inflation year over year. And according to Wallet Hub, that's the highest inflation rate of any U.S. city.
Wow. So Chicago...
You fools like me who live in the city of Chicago, we're paying more for inflation than anybody else. And according to Cranes, it's mostly due to housing and transportation costs. But everything else is running in there. So yeah, Chicago once again leads the nation in something.
So housing, Matt, would be
rent.
It has to be and rent, but it has to be associated with taxes.
Rent, taxes, I'm sure,
lights,
home insurance.
Yeah, home insurance.
Utilities, all that gets factored in. So yes, Chicago, we're paying more than anybody else.
Okay,
as
number
well as
one
real
again.
Estate taxes.
Number
Illinois
one again.
is number 2 in real estate taxes in the U.S. versus New Jersey, which is always the case, but we won't get into that.
We need to turn it around, Matt. Let's get into mortgage rates.
You got it. Mortgage rates. So I'll just do a quick hitter. As of today, the average 30-year fixed is just 6.7, 6.8%, which is pretty much where it's been the last few months. There's been some ups and downs, but it's trending a little lower, while the 15-year fixed is around 6.2, 6.3%. Once again, if you're watching this month over month, you're going to see that these mortgage rates are pretty stayed static. They're not. They haven't swung by a half to a 1% in quite a while.
And I see mortgage people all the time. They tell me that they still see rates they're going to get a little bit of a rate drop, but I wouldn't count on that to make a move.
And there's so many outside factors that are going to impact the Fed's rate and what they decide to do, the tariffs, all this stuff that we've talked about. Half the people are saying rates are going to go down the rest of the year. You got another half of the experts saying they're going to go up. So I'm going to say they're going to stick around this rate for the next few months.
Okay. Market stats, Chicago Metro.
So yeah, year over year, and I'm going to talk about January 24 versus January 23. Positive. So for the Chicago metro area, closed sales was up just over 8% year over year, just under 5,000 closed transactions. Median sales price year over year for January 25, 340,000. January 25, $340,000 median sales price. And then in January of 24, it was 315, so almost an 8% increase. Inventory of homes for sale, almost identical year over year, just under 11,000. In the days on market, year over year, almost identical, 35 days.
So, closed sales up 8.5, median sales price up 8, inventory still kind of stagnant, and which means that the inventory is actually shrinking because if there's more sales, and then days on market about the same. And last month, December 23 over 24 was about 8.8. Yeah. So we see there's some activities.
Right. I mean, what do you see like in the last few weeks? Is there been an uptick? Do you feel that there's things happening in the marketplace? Are we seeing things?
I would say it feels about the same, maybe just a little bit better, so I kind of jive with these numbers.
Okay.
Wisconsin,
once again, we're going to talk about, home sales. So January of 25 versus January of 24, almost identical in the number of home sales, just over 3,500 each year. Number of listings, almost identical, about 6% higher for January of 25 versus January of 24 to just 15,600. And then once again, median sales price, home price, almost 11% higher, 293,000 in January of 25 versus 265 in January of 24. So almost an 11% increase year over year of home sales price.
Okay.
And days on market, almost identical as well.
Okay, so we have Wisconsin. Matt, what is the news from Land Trust? What do we have here?
We got good stuff coming up. So
Let's hear it.
mentioned, on March 11th, between 10 and 11 o'clock, Steve is moderating Real Estate Fraud and Security Measures Free Zoom for Realtors. You're going to cover about the latest things happening of realtors, the red flags you need to watch out for. Realtors, in fact, you are the number one
target.
And so if you could identify the red flags, you could help quash a lot of the fraud that's happening out there. Steve's and our panelists, which include Mark Herrick, great guy from Angelina and Herrick, and Nick Jaworski, partner attorney. So these two gentlemen will be part of our attorney panel. Steve's going to talk about tales from the front, what's actually happening out there. Going to talk about red flags of fraud, the most, how hackers and scammers are getting in, and, part of the real estate fraud that we're seeing out there. And then you guys are going to talk about the security measures that are in place through Land Trust specifically, and we'll really highlight how we've locked down and are becoming, if not the number one resource for security in the title industry.
Matt, and we plan also on covering the steps that brokers can take to protect themselves.
Yep.
So, and insure themselves.
Yep.
Which that's interesting.
So if you haven't seen the Zoom invitation, you will.
Keep your eye out for it.
Realtors March 11th. And then we have another free Zoom session on March 18th, same time, 10 to 11. Steve is moderating. And it's going to be covering the new 8.0 real estate contract.
Absolutely.
So this went into effect, I believe, last month. So there's some changes that realtors need to be aware of. And we have another industry attorney panel that will be part of that, which includes Mike Wasserman, Will Lorman, and Peter Fitzgerald.
Yeah, and if you have looked at that contract and said, okay, how do I use it for my client's benefit? How am I going to navigate it better, faster, quicker, smarter than the rest, that'd be a great one to tune into.
If you haven't seen the latest podcast featuring Jamal Green, watch it.
Yeah.
Who's Jamal?
Jamal is the youngest candidate for mayor in Chicagoland, and he ran twice. But he is he's in the real estate space as well. He's an advocate for, he calls himself an American activist, and he's an advocate for housing in Chicagoland. He's an advocate for the people in his community. And I would say if you have a heart to, if you're thinking my small efforts don't make a difference, you will see how one man's efforts went from small to bigger to bigger. And so this is a guy that started where he was at and worked his way out and has accomplished a ton, and I think there's a lot to learn from him.
He's an interesting guy with a great personality and, like I said, a good story from the streets of Englewood to now helping people get and acquire home ownership.
Yeah. And then we also, Matt, we're going to have out soon the interview with the CEO of North Shore and Barrington Real Estate Association, Jeff Lasky. Lasky. And Jeff he also speaks a lot of things about the NAR association, local associations and all this. Great podcast for a lot of different insight on how the sausage is made and how realtors can benefit from being a part of their local association and all the things available to them.
Okay, so last on the list is I got to pay my debt.
Oh, what do we got?
Steve and I bet on the Super Bowl.
All right, what do we got?
And you bet on who? Who's
I bet on the Philadelphia Eagles.
So $1 paid in full.
Here we go.
$1 paid in full.
Thank you.
Well, happy Pulaski
Matt, it's great.
Day, everybody.
Yeah, is it Pulaski Day today?
Today is Pulaski
Okay.
Day.
Well, hey, this is the People Not Titles podcast signing off for our market trends of March 2025. Matt, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I spend this all in one place, or?
If you could find something to buy for $1 or less, you go right ahead.
There you go. Okay, blessings.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening to the People Not Titles podcast. We are proudly sponsored by Land Trust Title Services. If you enjoyed the podcast, please hit the like button, please subscribe, and we'd love it if you'd share our podcast with your friends. Thanks a lot.